Here today I'm going to talk about the China market and some of the opportunities there. I lived in China for a couple of years for MLA, and I guess 2 years in China is nowhere near enough to understand this complex market. We rely on our team of local experts there and years of experience from other people. But one thing I did learn being in China is that relationships are key, and we've got to forge those long-term partnerships in China as an industry, as individual companies, and as MLA as a marketing body. So I'll be teasing that out as I go through this morning. What I'll be covering today, I'll be talking about the market drivers, what's underpinning the growth in this market, and why is it so exciting. We'll be looking at some of the consumer perceptions. What are the consumers thinking about our product and how they're eating it, and what does it mean to them? And then I'll be finishing off with a bit of the MLA strategy and how our strategy underpins our long-term work up there to form the foundations of what I hope is a long and reliable market for us eventually. So starting off with the market, I'm just going to quickly take you through some key economic indicators. I'm going to have a look at the society and the changes in society and what that means for beef consumption. And then I'll have a look at the trade politics and we'll talk about some of the challenges we have in that market. So the Chinese economy is still quite robust, 6% growth. It's performing well above many of the developed nations. You can see there Australia, the US. So it's still a strong economy. It's cooled off from previous highs, but it is a large and strong economy. But it's a changing economy. So you can see there on the right, we're seeing that shift from rural populations to urban populations. And that has significant impact for us as an export nation to this country. More people's in the cities, more people wanting to buy, needing to buy food to live. So China represents 20% of the world's population, but it only has 6 or 7% of the world's water and agricultural land. So they need to import products. And that economy, looking at that economy and that urbanisation, we've got to have a think about where are those urban populations that we want to target. So the national average income is around that $6,000 per year. But when you look at those big cities on the East Coast, and there's a few of them there on the board, Beijing and Shanghai, for example, they're over double the size of the national population. So those are the markets that we need to be targeting. But we are seeing ongoing growth and ongoing changes in that structure of China. Some of you might have heard of the Belt and Road project. This is Xi Jinping's development project where he's reconnecting back up through Europe and into the Middle East, but also reconnecting with Southeast Asia, the old Silk trade routes. Those projects and that development will change, and you will see other pockets of wealth and growth pop up in China. So you've got to keep on top of it and keep monitoring that economic development. But with that change in the way they're living in cities, you're seeing a change in the way they spend. So we're seeing a shift from a manufacturing economy to a consumption-led economy. So they're buying more, and the way they're spending is different. They're spending it on food, tourism, on luxury goods. So that shift in behaviour is great for us because we're importing a luxury imported product, and we believe as they move that way, they'll want more of it. So those consumers are becoming more important that are spending money on luxury goods. But you hear a lot and see a lot in the papers here in Australia about the trade relationships. And there's some challenges there, and there's a fairly frosty relationship at the moment. But it is an important relationship, although it is complex. And you have to understand it's much more important to us than it is to China, this relationship. China is Australia's #1 trading partner, whereas we're only their 14th. We have a significant trade balance with China, so it's critical to us that we're there. But China is dealing with many, many countries, with many, many products. And so we're just one of many and trying to get a piece of the Chinese pie. And that translates into some of the politics, some of the issues we have and some of the things we see, some of the frustrations we have, particularly for our beef industry. It's very slow to get things processed in China. We want more plant registrations. We've seen frustrations with plants being delisted. We've seen frustrations just trying to get our product in there. But as I said, we are one of many We're just one of many countries coming through the door trying to get our products listed with AQSIQ. And we've got to understand that complexity and continue to build those relationships and continue to be there and continue to try to find a way to get us up the priority list. So it's a large market, it's a very complex and challenging market, but it does provide great opportunity for the Australian red meat industry. Next, I'll be talking through the consumer, some of the consumer perceptions, how they buy and they see luxury products. I'll be having a look at the protein mix, what products are they buying and how they're eating it, and then just drilling down into us, what's an Australian beef consumer look like? So often in China, price is a very key factor, but also familiarity and availability of product. But what we are seeing is shifts. We're seeing premiumism. We're seeing them wanting premium products. We're seeing them wanting safe and trusted products. We're seeing them wanting convenience. So you can see some of the photos there, the lady with the mask on and the flying drones delivering products. Having lived in Beijing, you don't want to go outside because of the pollution or the traffic. So having products come to your house is, these trends are hard to believe when you sit here in Rockhampton, but to think that they're looking for ways to deliver products straight to someone's door, whether it's a drone or a motorbike or whatever. So there's a really big change in the way they're purchasing, and we're seeing growth in online shopping and things like that. But you've got to understand the protein mix. We've heard a number of speakers this morning talk about that growth in protein consumption. But when you look at China, pork is king. So pork is the major protein consumed. It's ready and available, it's price affordable, and it suits all their major cooking styles. So they do definitely lean on pork. But beef is the major imported product that's coming in. We see big growth opportunities in the imported beef sector. So pork is king, but beef consumption is growing fast, and particularly as people try to upscale their purchases from beef to from pork to a beef meal. And as I mentioned, we see that China imported beef demand growing very robustly, and we see that continuing. And so as that beef pie grows, we want to see Australia continue to capture it. It's a very competitive sector. If you have a look at the market, the Brazilians are there, the Uruguayans are there, the Argentinas, New Zealand, and now the US. So it's a growing market, and there's a lot of competitors, but we see the opportunity to carve out that premium space for Australia. And when you look at the perceptions of Australian beef in the market, you can see why we've got a very good opportunity to do that. So we're seen as the most favoured, we're seen as consistent in quality and standards. And I think if you look at the bottom of that chart, they don't consider us cheap. And when consumers are going out to look for a premium product that they want to show off to their friends, they're not looking for a cheap product, they're looking for something that's premium and that they can show that they've made it into the world. You watch young ladies in the shopping centres sitting around eating a steak, they're just taking photos of the steak they bought to share it with their friends to let them know how much money they've just spent on that meal. So the consumer, there's a shifting demographics, but growing demand for those premium products, and particularly in the beef sector, I think there's growing opportunities. But we've got to have the right strategy to capture that. So I mentioned at the start, we've got to build foundations in China. We've got to build a strong foundation of relationships. We've got to continue to monitor those opportunities. It is a fast, dynamic market. It's changing really quickly. And we've got to have the right programs in place to capture it and to understand where we are at the moment on that evolution of China. So, a big part of our job in China is to facilitate the relationships with the Chinese government and the Chinese officials up there. So we're there to build the market access relationship. We work closely with our partners back here in Australia, the Australian government and the processing sector. A lot of the market access issues are technical, but we're up there just trying to continue to build a really strong platform so when we go to market, we've got the right people to talk to. We also need to continue to educate the trade. There's lots of new people into the sector, and we want to bring them in and get them to understand our product, how it's produced, where it comes from, our systems, and why it's good for their business. So we run a lot of workshops and forums just to keep the trade engaged with our product. So we've got to facilitate that ongoing relationship and build stronger relationships through the whole supply chain. But while we're doing that, we've got to understand this market's changing fast. So new delivery systems, new online platforms for promoting your product, new pathways to purchase. So it keeps changing. You see new stores popping up, these online, offline stores, which are an online company that are building a bricks and mortar supermarket to use as a distribution hub. It's changing really quickly. They move fast in China. So it's moving at rapid pace. And so we've got that local team on the ground to keep monitoring these trends and developments and help us adapt our strategies and approach. But then we've got to work with the trade over there, the commercial supply chains, and get them engaged with our product. You know, often it's a very commodity-driven approach up there of price. But once you get them engaged with the story, explain the product, how to use it, we're trying to get them to lift what they're doing. One of the biggest things, and the chart on the right there, is getting people to understand how the Chinese consumers want to eat it. A lot of people think that the Chinese just want to eat an Australian steak. Well, grilling is the least popular method for how they want to buy imported meat. So what we're trying to do is get the trade to present the product in a format that suits the cooking style that they're used to. So in this case, braising and stewing is key. So we understand those dynamics. It's about educating the whole trade through the supply chain to get a good outcome. So our strategy is built on relationships with a long-term focus. We've got to be there for the long term. We've got to keep turning up in China and representing Australia and talking to our customers. So just to wrap up, you know, it's a large and complex market, but we've got a team on the ground to help us understand that. The consumer dynamics are continually shifting, and we see that shift to premium products, and we believe beef is part of that story. Our strategy's got to be built on strong relationships right through the supply chain with a long-term focus. And I think by doing all of these things, working hand in hand with industry, we're setting the course for the future in China. Thank you.